He lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone else and life moved slowly. People had their routines, and any change was often noticed and talked about. He was someone who never really stood out. People often looked past him, thinking he was quiet and ordinary. He went to the same school, walked the same streets, and watched the same sunsets as everyone else. Yet there was a part of him that no one truly saw. He loved music more than anything. From the time he was very small, he would sit with a notebook of melodies, humming softly to himself when he thought no one was listening. At home, the sound of the piano in the corner of the living room was like a friend he could speak to without words. When he pressed the keys, the notes seemed to tell stories that he could never put into sentences. He spent hours experimenting, trying to create something that sounded right. But he kept it hidden because he knew the world around him didn't see him as someone capable of producing beauty from music. School was never easy. He walked through the crowded hallways with his head slightly down, avoiding the teasing and whispers. Some students were cruel, calling him a dreamer, someone who couldn't do anything important. Others ignored him, thinking he was just a quiet, unimportant presence. Teachers rarely noticed him beyond the basics of attendance and grades. They did not know about the evenings he spent at the piano, the small notebook filled with sketches of songs, or the way his fingers moved as if the keys themselves were a part of him. Despite the quiet life he led, there were moments when small hints of his talent slipped through. In music class, when everyone was off-key and hurried, he could hear the perfect sound of harmony and rhythm. Sometimes, the teacher would ask the class to play a simple tune, and though the other students struggled, he would complete it flawlessly. But it was never a performance meant for praise. He did it because the music felt alive in his hands, and when the sound came out right, it felt like breathing deeply for the first time. His parents were supportive in ways that were quiet but firm. They never pushed him into competitions or told him to seek recognition. They just knew he needed space and time. At home, they sometimes asked him to play a song for them. He would play, and they would watch with gentle smiles, as if they could feel the joy in the music. No one else seemed to notice, and maybe that was how he liked it. Music was his secret, something private that belonged only to him. Friends were scarce. He was not invited to many gatherings, and the ones he attended never included the chance to show his true self. People assumed they knew him because he was quiet and shy, but they never realized he had thoughts, emotions, and a depth of feeling that could be expressed through melodies. Sometimes he tried to speak, to tell a story or share an idea, but words felt clumsy. Music, however, was fluent and easy. It spoke for him when no one else would listen. One afternoon, a new poster appeared in the school hallway. It was about a local talent show, an event where students could sign up to perform anything they wished. There were prizes, sure, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to be seen. The notice had bright letters and cheerful images, and students gathered around, talking excitedly about their chances. Laughter and chatter filled the corridor as groups formed, discussing who would sing, dance, or recite poetry. He stopped to look, but he didn't say anything. The thought of signing up made his stomach twist. What if they laughed? What if he failed in front of everyone? It was safer to stay quiet. Still, the poster lingered in his mind. For days he walked past it, trying to ignore it, yet the idea gnawed at him. He would sit by the piano in his room, fingers hovering over the keys, imagining a melody that could capture the feelings he couldn't say out loud. The music came alive in those moments, and he felt something he rarely experienced. Hope. He began to think about what it would be like to perform in front of people. Not just to play, but to make them feel. Could he really do that? Doubt always crept in, whispering that he was not good enough, that others would laugh and dismiss him. But then, another voice inside said he had spent years preparing without anyone noticing, learning and practicing in secret. Maybe it was time someone heard it. School days went on, and the talent show was mentioned in passing conversations. Some students joked about who would embarrass themselves, while others talked about how great they would be. He watched from the corner, listening, observing, but not speaking. He did not belong to those conversations, yet the curiosity in him grew. He wanted to participate, wanted to let his music speak, even if just a little. One evening, he sat at the piano, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the evening air. His fingers touched the keys, hesitant at first, then confident. He played a simple tune, one he had been working on secretly for weeks. The sound was gentle, pure, and it carried a sense of longing, a story of a quiet soul waiting to be seen. He played again, adjusting a note here, a chord there until it felt just right. He closed his eyes, letting the music flow through him, and for the first time in a long while he felt brave. Days passed and the talent show drew nearer. Posters reminded everyone, teachers asked about participation, and students continued their rehearsals. He practiced in his room, sometimes losing track of time entirely. He did not tell anyone about it, not even his closest friend, who barely knew about his piano skills. He felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. What if it went wrong? What if they laughed? Yet, the music inside him was growing louder than the fear. One afternoon, he found himself standing in front of the school office, holding the sign-up form for the talent show. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote his name. It felt surreal, as if committing to this act would make the quiet world notice him. When he handed it in, the secretary gave him a polite smile, not knowing the storm of emotions behind it. He walked back to class, heart racing, trying to appear calm. But inside, a quiet determination had started to take root. Over the next week, he practiced constantly. Each note, each chord, was a step toward something bigger than himself. He imagined the audience, not their judgment, but their wonder, and it gave him courage. He played for hours, sometimes forgetting to eat, sometimes forgetting that the world outside existed. The music was alive, and he felt connected to something larger than himself. Even though the school remained indifferent to his presence in daily life, he now held a secret that gave him strength. Music was no longer just a private comfort. It was becoming a language, a voice that might finally be heard. And though he did not yet know what would happen on the day of the talent show, a small spark had ignited inside him, a spark that could change everything. The days leading up to the talent show were filled with tension and quiet excitement. He walked to school each morning with a strange mixture of nerves and anticipation. Every step felt heavier, as if he was carrying the weight of something important, something that could change how people saw him. The hallways seemed louder than before, and he noticed the laughter of students, the chatter about who would perform first, and the friendly rivalries that sprang up over who had the best song or the best dance routine. He kept to himself, listening and observing, letting the energy of the school sink in without revealing what he carried inside. At home, he practiced relentlessly. The piano had become his sanctuary, a place where he could pour every ounce of emotion into his music. He tried new rhythms, experimented with melodies, and even wrote a few small original compositions. Each evening, the soft glow of the lamp on the piano sheet cast shadows across the room, and he would lose himself for hours. Sometimes his fingers slipped or a chord sounded wrong, and frustration bubbled up, but he never gave up. He knew that perfection was not the goal. Expressing himself was. In the quiet moments, doubt crept in. He remembered the whispers in the hallways, the sneers from classmates, and the occasional mocking comment from teachers who didn't understand his potential. Could he really stand in front of everyone and perform? What if the music he had nurtured in secret did not make sense to them? These thoughts pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe at times. But he pushed them aside, reminding himself that this was about more than recognition. It was about letting the world hear a part of him that had always been hidden. He started to notice small signs of encouragement. One afternoon, a teacher who had rarely spoken to him mentioned his skill casually, saying, "You have a good ear for music. You should share it more often." It was a small remark, easily forgotten by anyone else, but to him, it felt like a quiet affirmation. He smiled, a rare smile, and allowed himself to think that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. Outside of school, he walked through the neighborhood streets and imagined the performance. Each step brought a mental rehearsal. The sound of applause, the expressions of surprise and joy on people's faces, and the way the music would flow through the room. He imagined the audience leaning forward, curious at first, then captivated by the melody. The thought made his heart pound, not with fear, but with a strange, exhilarating hope. Friends noticed a subtle change in him. Even though he did not share the details, they could see his quiet determination. Sometimes he would hum a tune under his breath or tap a rhythm on his desk. People would glance, smile, and then go back to their own conversations, unaware of the depth behind the gestures. He didn't care. The music was enough even if no one else understood it yet. School life continued its usual rhythm, but he approached each day with a new perspective. The talent show became the center of his thoughts. Every class period felt like a rehearsal in his mind. He imagined the spotlight on him, the soft click of the stage lights, and the hush of the audience just before he began. In these moments, the fear did not vanish, but it transformed into focus. He knew he had to prepare, not just for the performance, but for himself. One day, a student who had been skeptical of his abilities made a teasing remark. "You're going to mess it up, you know? You can't even play in music class properly," they said with a smirk. Normally, such words would have stung, but he felt a new strength. He remembered the hours at the piano, the countless notes practiced alone, and the melodies he had created. He nodded silently and walked away, carrying a quiet determination that no teasing could shake. At home, he began experimenting with a new piece for the show. It was unlike anything he had played before, combining rhythm, melody, and emotion in a way that felt raw and authentic. He played it over and over, sometimes stopping to scribble notes in his notebook, adjusting the timing, the tempo, and the flow. His parents listened from another room, hearing the faint strains of music that seemed to dance in the air. They knew he was preparing something special, but they did not pressure him. They just let him work, silently cheering him on. As the days passed, he also learned to manage his nerves. He practiced deep breathing and visualized the performance, imagining the audience as supportive and open-minded. He reminded himself that mistakes were part of the process and that the music was about expression, not perfection. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he played his piece with growing confidence, feeling the melody resonate not just in the room, but in his heart. The night before the talent show, he barely slept. His mind was alive with music, each note playing in his head as he imagined the moment he would step onto the stage. Anxiety mixed with excitement, creating a tension he had never felt before. He went to the piano one last time that night, playing softly in the dark, letting the music carry away his fear. When he finally lay down, the melodies lingered, comforting and encouraging him at once. The next morning, he awoke early, feeling a strange mix of calm and anticipation. He went through his usual morning routine with care, making sure everything was ready for the big day. On the way to school, he walked slowly, letting the quiet morning air soothe him. The streets were empty compared to the usual bustle, and he found a strange comfort in the stillness. He arrived at school, the talent show only hours away, and felt a sense of purpose he had never known. During the day, whispers about the talent show filled the corridors. Students laughed, joked, and speculated about who would perform well and who would fail. He kept his head down, focused on his own preparation, listening to the excitement without becoming distracted. He understood that no one expected much from him. They thought he was quiet, shy, and incapable of standing out. That thought, instead of discouraging him, fueled his resolve. If they thought he couldn't play, it only made the opportunity to surprise them all the more powerful. In the final class before the show, the teacher reminded everyone to gather in the auditorium later in the afternoon. Excitement buzzed in the air. He felt a lump in his throat, but also a strange thrill. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The chance to let his music speak louder than words was almost here. He spent the last few hours before the show rehearsing in small bursts, touching the piano keys in his mind, and imagining the melody flowing through the room. When it was finally time, he walked toward the auditorium with a steady, determined pace. His hands were slightly shaky, but his mind was clear. He could hear the murmurs of the crowd, the rustle of chairs, and the soft hum of anticipation. His turn had not yet come, and he watched the other performers with interest. Some were confident and polished, others nervous and faltering. Each performance was a reminder that talent took many forms and that everyone had their own fears and hopes. He found a quiet corner backstage, taking deep breaths and letting the music fill him. He reminded himself of the months spent practicing alone, of the melodies that had carried him through quiet evenings and lonely afternoons. He remembered every note he had played, every chord he had perfected, and every emotion he had poured into the music. He closed his eyes, letting the anticipation wash over him, and for the first time, he felt a calm determination. He was ready. As the announcer called his name, he walked onto the stage. The bright lights made him squint, and the audience seemed larger than life. There were students, teachers, parents, and visitors, all waiting, watching, expecting something. He could hear the faint rustle of whispers, some of doubt, some of curiosity. He took his place, sat at the piano, and let his fingers rest lightly on the keys. The room fell silent, and in that silence he found his voice. He began to play, the notes flowing effortlessly, carrying his story, his emotions, and his courage to everyone who listened. The hidden performer was finally stepping into the light. The auditorium was filled with murmurs, the soft hum of excitement and curiosity buzzing in the air. He walked to the center of the stage, feeling the weight of every eye on him. The bright lights made him squint, and for a brief moment, fear pressed against his chest. He reminded himself to breathe, to remember all the months of practice, and the countless hours he had spent perfecting each note in private. He sat at the piano, his fingers hovering above the keys, and felt the familiar surge of calm that only music could give him. As he pressed the first key, the sound seemed almost small in the vast auditorium, but it carried with it every emotion he had bottled up. The notes flowed gently, like a river starting to move, quiet at first, but gaining strength. People shifted in their seats, curious at the delicate melody. It was soft, tender, and filled with a sense of longing. Some students whispered to each other, surprised that someone so quiet could produce such beauty. He continued, letting the music take over. Each note was deliberate, each chord carefully chosen to express a feeling he could not put into words. His hands moved with grace, confident and sure, as if the piano itself knew the story he wanted to tell. The audience began to lean forward, drawn into the sound, listening more intently than they had anticipated. The shy performer they had dismissed was creating something powerful and alive. At first, there were subtle signs of astonishment. A teacher's eyes widened slightly, a classmate's mouth fell open, and a few students exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the unexpected talent before them. The music rose and fell, weaving through moments of quiet reflection and surges of energy. It was not just skill. It was emotion, a story of hidden struggles, hope, and quiet resilience. He noticed the change in the room. The whispers faded, replaced by a focused silence. The audience was captivated, not by theatrics, but by the honesty and purity of the performance. The rhythm of the music resonated with everyone, each note echoing in their hearts. Even the students who had mocked him before sat still, their eyes fixed on the piano, unable to look away. He allowed himself to close his eyes briefly, feeling the flow of sound and emotion, letting the music guide him. It was as if the piano and he were one entity, speaking a language no one needed to understand fully to feel. The notes climbed higher, faster, then fell into gentle, soothing patterns, mirroring the fluctuations of human emotion. He poured everything he had into each moment, not caring about recognition, only about expression. The crescendo came, and the auditorium seemed to hold its breath. The performance was no longer just notes on a page. It was a story coming to life. The people who had doubted him were now wide-eyed, astonished at the depth and beauty of what they were witnessing. Some had tears, others had smiles, and a few simply stared in silent awe. He played with abandon, completely absorbed in the music, letting go of all fear and self-doubt. He moved to the final sequence, the most difficult part of the composition. Every key demanded precision and control, and yet he played with effortless grace. The music swelled, filling the auditorium with emotion, carrying a message of hope and courage. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared him for the power of the actual experience. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of admiration, surprise, and pure joy. When the final note lingered in the air and faded, there was a moment of silence. Time seemed to pause as everyone absorbed what they had just heard. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and louder until it filled the entire space. People were clapping, cheering, and even some were on their feet. The shy, quiet student who had been overlooked for so long had left them speechless with a performance that no one could ignore. He sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, feeling the rush of adrenaline and the warmth of recognition. He had never experienced anything like this before. It was not just about the applause. It was about being seen, truly seen, for something that had been a part of him all along. The fear and doubt that had plagued him were replaced with a sense of accomplishment and pride. Teachers approached him after the performance, congratulating him with genuine smiles and admiration. Students who had teased him now looked at him with respect and curiosity, wanting to know how he could create something so extraordinary. He felt a mix of humility and happiness, realizing that the music had spoken louder than words ever could. Even his parents, who had quietly supported him all these years, were beaming with pride. They had watched from the back of the auditorium, hearts swelling with joy, knowing that their child had finally shared the gift that had always been within. The moment was magical, not because of fame or attention, but because it was honest, pure, and heartfelt. As he stepped away from the piano, the applause still ringing in his ears, he felt a sense of transformation. He had crossed a threshold, moving from being invisible to being recognized, not just for his talent, but for the courage it took to reveal it. He realized that the performance was more than just music. It was a statement of identity, a proof that hidden strength could emerge at the right time. After the show, people came up to him offering congratulations and praise. Some students admitted they had underestimated him, while others simply thanked him for the beauty they had just experienced. The auditorium, which had been filled with chatter and expectations, now felt like a space of shared wonder and appreciation. He walked home that evening with a lightness in his step that he had never known. The streetlights glowed softly, and the night air was calm and welcoming. He thought about the performance, replaying it in his mind, and smiled. For the first time, he felt that the world might see him differently, not because he demanded attention, but because he had allowed himself to be heard. The experience had changed him. He felt more confident, more alive, and more connected to the world around him. The music had been his voice, and it had reached out to everyone in that room. He knew that there would be other performances, other opportunities, but this one would always hold a special place in his heart. It was the moment he stepped out of the shadows and let his talent shine. In the days that followed, whispers about the talent show continued, but now they were filled with awe and admiration. People spoke of the quiet student who had surprised them all, the one who had hidden his gift for so long and then revealed it in a way that left everyone amazed. He walked through the halls with a quiet smile, feeling a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He also realized that the performance was not just for the audience. It was for himself. He had proved that he could overcome fear, doubt, and the opinions of others. He had embraced his talent fully and shared it with courage. The music had given him a voice and, in doing so, had opened a new chapter in his life. From that day on, he practiced not just for himself, but with the knowledge that his music could touch others. Each note carried the memory of that first performance, the thrill of being heard, and the joy of creating something beautiful. He understood that talent could be hidden, overlooked, and underestimated, but when revealed with honesty and passion, it had the power to captivate hearts and change lives. After the performance, the auditorium was buzzing with excitement. People talked in hushed tones, replaying the music in their minds and sharing their astonishment. Teachers who had once overlooked him found themselves thinking about the quiet student in a new light. Students who had doubted him walked through the halls with a mixture of surprise and admiration. He felt the change in the air, subtle but powerful, like the world around him had shifted slightly, acknowledging a truth that had always been there. He returned to his seat backstage, still feeling the echoes of the applause in his chest. His hands trembled slightly, but the feeling was not of fear. It was exhilaration, pride, and relief all at once. For years, he had played in private, sharing melodies only with himself and a few family members. Tonight, the music had traveled further, touching hearts and minds in ways he had only imagined. The realization was overwhelming, but also deeply fulfilling. People began approaching him, some timidly, some with enthusiastic smiles. A few classmates admitted that they had been wrong about him, that his talent was beyond what they had expected. Others simply expressed their awe, saying they had never heard anything like it before. Even those who had been jealous or dismissive now nodded respectfully, recognizing the skill, dedication, and emotion that went into his performance. Each interaction filled him with a quiet confidence he had never experienced before. The teachers, who had always been polite but distant, were now openly congratulatory. They spoke to him about his technique, the emotion in his playing, and the potential he had yet to explore. One of them suggested he consider joining a music program or participating in more competitions. The words were encouraging, and he realized that the world outside of his private practice could now become part of his journey. The validation was not just for the performance. It was a recognition of years of effort, persistence, and love for his craft. As the evening wore on, he walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights. The world seemed quieter, but alive in a different way. People he passed on the street nodded or smiled, aware of the performance that had become the talk of the day. He felt lighter, freer, and more connected to the community around him. It was not fame he sought, but the acknowledgement that his passion mattered and could resonate with others. At home, he reflected on the events of the night. The piano in the living room seemed to call to him, and he sat down, letting his fingers move over the keys. The music that flowed was different now, more confident, more expansive, and full of emotion that was no longer confined to secrecy. He played slowly, savoring each note, remembering the faces in the auditorium, the quiet gasps of surprise, and the applause that had seemed endless. The feeling of being seen, truly seen, was indescribable. His parents, who had always quietly supported him, shared their pride and joy. They had witnessed the culmination of his dedication and the beauty he had kept hidden for so long. They spoke of how the world could not deny talent that was genuine, that came from the heart, and that had been nurtured patiently and privately. Their words were gentle, yet carried a depth of understanding that reassured him. For the first time, he felt that the music he loved so deeply could also be a bridge to the world beyond his room. In the days following the show, life at school shifted subtly. Students greeted him differently, with nods of respect or questions about his music. Some sought advice, others asked to hear him play again. The quiet student who had blended into the background had now become a source of inspiration, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that everyone had a story hidden beneath the surface. He continued to practice daily, but now with a renewed purpose. The music was no longer just a private escape. It was a gift he could share. He began experimenting with new compositions, inspired by the energy of the performance and the reactions of the audience. Each note, each chord, was infused with confidence, and he found joy in exploring melodies he had never dared to try before. His skill improved, not just technically but emotionally, as he learned to communicate more deeply through his music. The memory of the performance stayed with him, shaping his approach to life and to music. He realized that the courage to perform, to reveal what was hidden, had been as transformative as the music itself. The experience taught him that fear and doubt could be overcome with persistence and belief in one's own abilities. The applause, the admiration, and the astonished faces of those who had doubted him were symbols of that truth, a reminder that hidden talent, when nurtured and shared, could change perceptions and inspire others. He began to take small steps beyond the school auditorium. A local music club invited him to play, and he accepted cautiously. He performed at small community gatherings, each time feeling a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. The response was always warm, encouraging, and filled with appreciation. He noticed how people reacted differently when they truly listened, how the music could create connection, and how his own confidence grew with each performance. In school, he became more involved in music classes, helping classmates understand rhythm, melody, and expression. He did not boast or draw attention to himself, but quietly shared his knowledge and passion. Students who had once mocked him began to seek his guidance, and the atmosphere in the music room changed. There was a sense of respect and camaraderie, a recognition that talent could be both humble and extraordinary. The performance also brought personal growth. He found that he could now express himself more openly, not just through music but in conversations, in group work, and in social interactions. The courage he had discovered on the stage had seeped into other parts of his life, giving him the confidence to speak, to share ideas, and to connect with people he had previously avoided. The shy student who once stayed in the background was beginning to emerge in subtle, meaningful ways. As the weeks passed, he continued to receive invitations to perform, each one a chance to share his music and to inspire others. He accepted selectively, choosing opportunities that felt meaningful rather than simply popular. Each performance reinforced his belief in the power of expression and the importance of persistence. He understood that true talent was not about recognition or applause alone, but about the ability to touch hearts, to communicate emotions, and to reveal the hidden depths of one's soul. The experience also strengthened his relationships with those around him. Friends and family became more attuned to his passion and the dedication behind it. They supported him not just in words, but in actions, attending performances, offering encouragement, and sharing in the joy of his accomplishments. The sense of connection, previously absent, now became a source of comfort and inspiration. He reflected often on the journey that had brought him to this point. From quiet afternoons at the piano to the electrifying performance in front of a full auditorium, he realized that every moment of practice, every note played in solitude, had led him to a place of confidence and recognition. He understood that success was not immediate or guaranteed, but earned through dedication, patience, and belief in oneself. The climax of his journey was not only the performance, but the transformation it brought within him. He learned that fear could be confronted, that hidden abilities could be revealed, and that courage often led to unexpected and beautiful outcomes. The music had been his guide, his voice, and his teacher, showing him the way to self-discovery and growth. As the months went on, he continued to compose, perform, and inspire. The memory of the first performance remained vivid, a reminder of what was possible when talent met opportunity and courage. Each note played was a testament to the journey, a blend of struggle, hope, and triumph. He had learned to trust himself, to embrace his abilities, and to share them with the world without hesitation. He had stepped from the shadows into the light, not to seek fame, but to honor the music that had been a part of him all along. The hidden performer had emerged, leaving a lasting impact on everyone who had witnessed his talent. And in that emergence, he found not only recognition but a sense of belonging, purpose, and the quiet joy of knowing that he had finally let the world hear the music that had always lived in his heart. Time passed, but the memory of the first performance stayed with him like a gentle echo. Every time he played, he remembered the moment he stepped onto the stage, the hush of the audience, and the thrill of letting the music speak. The applause, the astonished faces, and the sense of connection he felt that day became a part of him, shaping how he approached music and life itself. He continued to practice daily, but the practice was no longer driven by secrecy or doubt. Instead, it was fueled by a desire to explore, to create, and to communicate. He experimented with new melodies, new rhythms, and even new instruments, discovering layers of sound and emotion he had never explored before. Each session brought new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of joy. Music had become not just a passion, but a language he used to understand himself and the world around him. In school, his presence became more noticeable. Teachers greeted him warmly, students asked questions, and even those who had once ignored him now sought his advice or simply wanted to listen to him play. He found that he could navigate the social world more confidently, speaking with quiet assurance and expressing his thoughts without fear of judgment. Music had opened a door, not just to performance, but to personal growth and connection. He started taking part in local music events beyond the school, performing at small community gatherings, charity events, and even family celebrations. Each time, he felt a mixture of nerves and excitement, but the confidence he had gained from the first performance helped him navigate every new experience. People who had never seen him play before were often surprised, moved, and inspired. His music became a bridge, connecting him to others in ways words could not. The shy, quiet student who had once blended into the background was now recognized as a talented musician in the community. But he never let recognition become the goal. For him, the joy of creating and sharing music remained the center. Each performance was a conversation with the audience, a chance to express feelings that were otherwise hard to describe. He learned that talent was not about seeking attention, but about honesty, dedication, and the courage to reveal what was inside. His parents remained a steady source of support. They continued to watch quietly, offering encouragement and sharing in his successes. Their pride was evident in the little things. The gentle smile when he finished a piece, the way they listened intently when he described a new melody, and the simple words of affirmation that always came from the heart. They had nurtured him without pressure, and now they celebrated the results with love and humility. As his confidence grew, he also found joy in helping others discover their own talents. In school, he began mentoring younger students, showing them that skill and passion could flourish with patience and practice. He shared tips, encouraged experimentation, and celebrated every small victory. He realized that teaching others not only helped them, but also deepened his own understanding and appreciation for music. The experience of giving back added a new dimension to his journey. Despite the growing attention, he remained grounded. He remembered the days when he practiced alone, when no one noticed, and when music was his private world. That quiet time had been essential in shaping his skills, his patience, and his perspective. He understood that true talent was not about immediate recognition, but about commitment, love, and perseverance. The accolades and applause were sweet, but they were secondary to the joy of creating something meaningful. He also discovered that music could heal. He noticed how people reacted differently when they listened with attention and care. Some were moved to tears, others to quiet reflection, and some simply smiled with understanding. He realized that his music could touch lives, offering comfort, inspiration, or a moment of beauty. This understanding deepened his dedication, motivating him to continue exploring the emotional power of sound. In the following months, he composed new pieces inspired by experiences, memories, and emotions. He experimented with combining instruments, exploring dynamics, and creating complex harmonies. Each composition was a reflection of his growth, both as a musician and as a person. He felt more connected to the world, more aware of his feelings, and more capable of expressing them through music. School life continued, but the dynamic had changed. He was no longer overlooked or underestimated. Teachers, classmates, and even the principal recognized his talent and dedication. The student who once sat quietly in the back of the classroom now had a voice that was heard, respected, and appreciated. His story became an example for others, showing that perseverance and courage could overcome doubt and indifference. One afternoon, he was invited to perform at a larger community event. The stage was bigger, the audience larger, and the stakes higher. But he approached it with calm determination. He knew that fear and nerves were natural, but he also knew that music was his language, and he could communicate through it. As he played, the audience was captivated once again. Some familiar faces from the first performance, and many new ones. The energy was palpable, and he felt a profound sense of purpose. After the performance, people approached him, offering praise, gratitude, and curiosity. Parents thanked him for inspiring their children, students expressed admiration, and community members spoke of the joy his music brought. He listened, smiled, and acknowledged each comment with humility. The experience reinforced the lesson that talent shared generously could create ripples far beyond what he had imagined. Over time, he began to understand that his journey was about more than music. It was about growth, courage, and the willingness to step out of the shadows. The shy student who once believed he could not be noticed had learned to trust himself, embrace his abilities, and share them openly. The transformation was not only external but internal, shaping his character, his confidence, and his outlook on life. He also started writing small notes and reflections about his experiences, capturing his thoughts, feelings, and insights. These reflections were personal, private, and therapeutic. They reminded him of the challenges he had overcome, the moments of doubt, and the victories, both big and small. The act of writing, like music, became a tool for understanding himself and his journey. Friends and family continued to celebrate his achievements quietly. They attended performances, listened to his compositions, and shared in his successes without making him feel pressured or boastful. Their support was steady and reliable, providing a safe space for him to explore, create, and grow. He learned the value of quiet encouragement and the impact it could have on confidence and persistence. As he looked back, he realized that every step, from the quiet evenings at the piano to the first performance in the auditorium, had been essential. The fears, the doubts, the secret practices, and the small moments of encouragement had all contributed to the person he had become. The journey had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of self-belief. He understood that life would continue to present challenges, moments of uncertainty, and opportunities to grow. But he felt prepared, equipped not just with skill, but with confidence, resilience, and a sense of purpose. Music had been the guide, the teacher, and the companion, leading him to discover the strength within himself and the power to touch others' lives. In the end, he realized that the first performance was only the beginning. It had opened doors, inspired others, and transformed him. But the true reward was not in recognition or applause. It was in the courage to be himself, the joy of creating, and the knowledge that hidden talent, when nurtured and shared, could leave a lasting impact. He continued to play, compose, and share, embracing every note, every audience, and every moment. The hidden performer had emerged fully, not seeking approval, but honoring the gift within. And in doing so, he found a life filled with purpose, connection, and the quiet, profound joy of music that could be heard, felt, and remembered by all who listened.